Hey everyone, what up? Matt Kaiser here. Now when it comes to the best console to play JRPGs on, especially currently, it would undoubtedly be the Nintendo Switch, having a great mixture of playing it either on the go with handheld or playing it docked on your TV, as well as having a very good selection of JRPGs from both first party with Xenoblade Chronicles as well as Fire Emblem Three Houses, or even third party selections like Dragon Quest XI, Persona 5 Royal, Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake, Octopath Traveler, the list goes on and on and on. However, while there is still lots of great JRPGs to play on the Switch, there's still actually a very good amount of JRPGs that never came onto the Switch, even to this day. Whether that be to the Switch not being up to snuff with its power, or just devs being absolutely lazy and leaving money on the table. Yeah, I think it's the latter. However, with the Nintendo Switch 2 officially being revealed and proven to potentially be a much more powerful system than the original Switch, I thought it would be a great time to list down my most wanted JRPGs to come to the Switch 2. Now for a few ground rules and clarification. For one, I'm going to try to have at least one entry per franchise, though with a few exceptions, though we'll get to that sooner or later. Another, of course, is my opinion, and the third part is that it's mostly on games that still are available on PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC, but still never came to the original Switch. So, those are the ground rules. But before we begin, if you'd like to see any, by all means, like the video, click the subscribe button if you're new, and hit that notification icon if you want more JRPG content from yours truly. But with that said, let's not waste any more time and get straight on to the list. Coming at number 10, we have is Nier Replicant version 122, or whatever you want to call it. Now, Nier Replicant version 122 is a full-on remake remaster of the original Nier Replicant that was actually from the PlayStation 3, where you get to play as Brother Nier as opposed to Nier Gestalt, where you get to play as Papa Nier in the Xbox 360 version that was actually localized and came to the West. Now, for saying that, this is actually a sort of prequel to the very much beloved and quickly acclaimed and successful Nier Automata, with telling you the story beforehand and overall having an interesting perspective and background, while having just amazing wonderful characters with the likes of Kaine, Emil and Grimoire Weiss, while also having fantastic music and much more improved combat over the original, as well as even a brand new addition of content. Now for saying that, despite on how good this remake remaster is, it is surprising that this never came onto Nintendo Switch. Given the fact that Nier Automata recently came onto Nintendo Switch, and recently it's sold over 9 million copies worldwide, which is huge, especially for a game that's well over 8 years old and has put the Nier series now into the mainstream status because of that. So I do think that Nier Replicant version 122 should be on the Nintendo Switch, let alone the Nintendo Switch 2. As currently, sales-wise, it did get at least 1.5 billion copies, but doesn't have the legs that Automata has. So I do think that hopefully some point around the Nier 50th anniversary, not only do we get a brand new Nier announcement, but we also get Nier Replicant version 122 also on the Switch 2 as well, so those who played Automata can experience what Replicant is like. Coming at number 9, we have is one of my very first rule breakers here, and that had to be the entire Yakuza Like a Dragon series as well as the Judgment franchise. Now, the Yakuza series has a bit of a rough history with Nintendo, given the fact that, well, only Yakuza 1 and 2, the PS2 versions, were for the Wii U, but that ended up horribly given on multiple factors. And ever since then, the Yakuza series has been, well, adamant of coming to the Switch. Though recently things have changed last year when Yakuza Kiwami, the first one, the remake of the original Yakuza 1, did come to Switch, albeit with mixed results. But given the fact that, well, despite on some rough aspects of Yakuza Kiwami, it did fairly okay, and I do think that Sega and RGG are more forward now to port their games for the Nintendo Switch too, especially given the fact that Sega has been on a roll with the Nintendo Switch, with of course, both Persona and Shin Megami Tensei. So I do think it's paramount for them to also port their games onto the Nintendo Switch too, without any question. And that includes the entire Yakuza franchise, from Yakuza Kiwami 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Yakuza Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Like a Dragon Gaiden, as well as Like a Dragon Ishin, both Judgment and Lost Judgment, as well as the brand new Like a Pirate Hawaii, the Majima Pirate game. So I do think all of those will be a great addition for Nintendo Switch 2. I know certain Yakuza fans, Like a Dragon fans, would really be ecstatic for it, especially those who are watching this video, Fem Trooper and Eric Lad. But yeah, I think having a Yakuza, like the entire Yakuza series on a handheld platform would be absolutely dope, and especially those who may be, well amazed by Kiwami after playing it, would like to try out the other series, and I do think that those can do relatively well on the Nintendo Switch too. Coming at number 8, we have is Persona 3 Reload. Now, Persona 3 Reload is a full-on remake of the original Persona 3, as well as having aspects of Persona 3 FES, with of course the answer that's been remade into Persona 3 Reload Episode Aegis. Now, regardless of what people say about it, whether it's a good remake of the original Persona 3, or it's a full-on definitive version of it, that's up for debate. But overall, it was still a relative success, having sold over 1 million copies, being one of the fastest selling Persona games out there, as well as made people enjoying it for what it was, especially those who never got to play the original Persona 3 due to various factors, and still, lots of veterans still enjoy Persona 3. And given the fact that this game never came onto Nintendo Switch, despite the fact that we did have, Persona 5 Royal, Persona 4 Golden, and Persona 3 Portable, it did seem a little bit weird for this game not to be on Nintendo Switch, though it does seem evident that this game is set up for Nintendo Switch too, even if you do take the rumors out of the equation. So I do think having it, as well as its DLC, as one full-on definitive version where players can get both Persona 3 Reload and the expansion pass in one package, especially for Switch 2, is a good call, and I think that both Atlus and Sega are, ready for it. They're gonna put this game on Nintendo Switch 2, maybe even day 1 or day, a couple of days when it's released for Nintendo Switch 2. And the same can be said for my next pick. And speaking of next pick, that would have to be of course Metaphor Fantasio. Now this game is recently one of the best JRPGs that came out since last year, and one of the best things to come out of Atlus, being a brand new IP that takes all the great aspects of Persona in general and having a brand new twist, with having a brand new fantasy setting with interesting themes as well as an interesting story and amazing characters, to having wonderful, amazing music, and just amazing turn-based combat, especially with the addition of the job system. Metaphor Fantasio has gained lots of critical acclaim and has even sold very well, especially given the fact that it sold 1 million copies, which is mind-blowing. And obviously the caveat for this game is that this game hasn't come to Nintendo Switch, despite the fact that it's running on a similar architecture and engine to like Persona 5 Royal. So I do think that, obviously given the fact that it never came to the Switch, was a little bit of an oddball decision, but understandably so. And I do think that, just like with Persona 3 Reload, both Sega and Atlus are on board of putting this game on the Nintendo Switch 2 to get more units and get more players interested to this game, as overall it's a pretty damn good JRPG in general. So I do think both Persona 3 Reload as well as Metroid Fantasio are definitely coming to Nintendo Switch 2. No notes, no question. Coming at number 6, we have is my second rule breaker, and that would have to be from the Final Fantasy series, most notably Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, as well as Final Fantasy VII Remake, and of course Final Fantasy XVI. Now, going off with Final Fantasy XVI, it's one of the more enjoyable and best rated Final Fantasies we had in a while. Now, obviously while it's not entirely perfect as it does have some issues, it's still promised to be an enjoyable title with having, a pretty solid story, having wonderful, amazing characters, especially Clive, who's one of the best protagonists to come out of Final Fantasy, as well as having a fantastic score, enjoyable gameplay, and just amazing icon set pieces all around. And obviously, this game did very okay with it selling over 3 million units, though the legs of that game hasn't been updated ever since it did come to PC, and given the fact that Square Enix are prioritizing multi-platform now, and they're likely wanting to put this game obviously on Xbox and then also Switch 2, I definitely do think it's a possibility. Now, it may be a little bit tough given the fact that this game runs on the PS5 and it might take a lot to downscale it to get it properly running, given the fact that, well, the PC version of Final Fantasy XVI wasn't entirely that great, as well as also the PS5 version did have some issues with Final Fantasy XVI, but if they have the power to downscale it and make it run fairly well, then that should be okay. And the same could be more or less with Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, with both of them being remakes of the original Final Fantasy VII, with having just better graphics, as well as having an emphasis on the characters and giving them a deeper focus, as well as having different paths to the overall original story, but still being relatively faithful in a sense, and having fantastic music and overall just again fantastic combat, especially Rebirth being a genuine improvement all around. I do think that those games are due to come to the Switch 2. Obviously there might be some downscaling, more so with Rebirth given that it's an open world game, and they'll have to tone it down to be on like say the PS4 Final Fantasy VII Remake sort of specs, like even having like 30 FPS. But again, I think that's a relatively good compromise, and even the same goes with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, with the UV DLC being implemented to be on par with the PS4 version that didn't even have the UV DLC or the improved lighting or frame rate. I think those 3 games will be relatively successful on the Switch 2. They can even increase their sales with, Final Fantasy VII Remake gaining around 7 million units, as well as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. While still undetermined, a lot of people are suggesting that it did sell around 2 million, which isn't too bad, but not as what Square Enix would have liked to hope, as well as Final Fantasy VII 16 also selling 3 million units. I think putting those on a Nintendo Switch 2 will be an absolute good call, especially given the fact that obviously there's rumors of it coming to Switch 2 and Xbox for all 3 of those games. So we'll have to wait and see. Coming at number 5, we have Scarlet Nexus. Now, Scarlet Nexus is one of my favorite JRPGs to come out of the modern era of gaming, especially this modern decade, where this game was pretty much a good surprise, especially coming from Bandai Namco that gave a brand new IP, having a very cool futuristic setting with amazing fast-paced combat, with playing as either Yuito or Kasane, having their own unique movesets, as well as implementing both the psychokinesis system, where you get to throw lots of objects at enemies, as well as incorporating SCS, where you get to borrow elemental powers from your allies, all the more having a really solid and enjoyable story, as well as tons of likable characters and a banger soundtrack. Good lord, this soundtrack slaps. And I do think that this game is due to come to Switch 2, given the fact that, well, this game never came to Nintendo Switch, despite the fact that I think it could have done okay. For sales wise, it did sell around 1 million around in 2022, but there has not been an update or sales figures upon that. And despite the fact that we did get, brand new content, free content, and even paid DLCs, all the mix to, make Star Nexus both accessible and really playable to a T. So I do think that this game is due to be on the Nintendo Switch too, especially since, people who like games like, say, Astral Chain might get a kick out of Star Nexus, as it does click in some of the same buttons in my opinion. I think it's a great game, and I think more people need to play this, and hopefully if it does come to Nintendo Switch 2, given the fact that Bandai Namco has slowly come to port their games on the Nintendo Switch 1, I think they're paramount of porting this game, as well as a certain other title that we'll get later down the line on the list. Coming at number 4, we have is Visions of Mana. Now, Visions of Mana, to me, is probably the most underrated slept-on JRPG to come out of last year, and overall was a very great surprise and a welcome addition to the long-running Mana series. From having just really stunning graphics and beautiful visuals, to having overall amazing combat, as well as the expanded job system, and having an emphasis on both the story and characters, which is a little bit unparalleled compared to other Mana games, but still a welcome addition in my book, as well as having a beautifully amazing score. Now obviously this game never came to the Switch, obviously due to reasons, mainly from the developers, and that has kind of, bite them in the back a little bit, given that this game didn't sell all that relatively well, and that the studio that made Visions of Mana had shut down. But given that also that the director of this game has joined Square Enix, and Square Enix still own the IP, I do think that they are still able to port Visions of Mana to Switch 2. I mean, they don't even need to have the same people that made this game to port it, just like on how they got a third-party studio to port Nier Automata to Nintendo Switch 1, which was from Virtuos, not Platinum Games. So I do think that Nintendo Switch 2 will be a good saving grace for Visions of Mana, as I think it could hopefully give the boost in sales, given the fact that the Mana series has been mostly associated with, Nintendo, then PlayStation. So I do hopefully this game does come to Nintendo Switch 2, so that lots of people can officially play it more and have an increase in sales, and still keep the Mana series well on track. It is one of my strong hopes and beliefs for this game to come to the Nintendo Switch 2 in some manner of way. Coming at number 3, we have is Granblue Fantasy Relink. Now for me, it was another underrated slept-on masterpiece around in 2024, and unlike Visions of Mana, it did still do relatively okay. I mean, it did sell around 1 million units in about over a week over its, initial release. And for my money's worth, it was well worth the 8-year-long wait. Everything by having just the stunning, beautiful art direction and overall visuals that really complement and just fully embrace the art style of Granblue Fantasy as a whole into a fully fledged 3D console game. Not only that, but the music is absolutely stellar, combined with having just amazing combat with a very diverse lineup of characters you get to choose from, each with their own unique movesets as well as skills, and complemented by having a very breezy story campaign with some really epic set pieces and bosses to boot, as well as a robust endgame where you get to keep playing from hours and hours to really have a very fun time, as well as even have the addition of online co-op. Now, regardless of what you say about how the story felt or the fact that this game didn't have the best online, overall I think Granblue Fantasy Relink was a very fun time. And I do think that this game does deserve, to be on Nintendo Switch 2, with hopefully the online being very solid for this game to work, especially with its multiplayer, as well as more people get to play this game on the Nintendo Switch 2, as I think having a portable Granblue Fantasy Relink experience would go a long way and help this gain a lot more legs than it needed to back in 2024. So overall, definitely, hopefully this does come to Nintendo Switch too, as I would love to even have a chance to maybe replay it again. But not as much as my next entry. And coming in at number 2, we of course have Tales of Arise. Now, if you've been a long-time viewer of this channel, you know how much I love Tales of Arise. Everything by having just these wonderful, gorgeous art style and graphics that really puts the Tales series up to the mainstream, by also having just a wonderful cast of characters and an overall enjoyable story, to having some of the most fastest and dynamic action combat we had in the series in a long time, since both Graces and the Xillia duology for my money's worth, and overall a very solid OST. And this game was still a success. Like recently it has sold around 3 million units, which is amazing for the series, and it has got stellar reviews and even won awards like Best RPG of 2021 at the Game Awards. It has done a lot to push the series forward. Now the only caveat is that this game never came to Nintendo Switch, though unlike some other games I do kinda see why it came to it, given on how this game does feel a bit complex to be ported for a Switch run, so I do hope that this game does come on a Nintendo Switch 2 at some point, as I would love to have a chance to replay this game on a more portable system, even if they have to either downscale it a little bit, and as well they can also even port the DLC expansion, that being Beyond the Dawn. Even if that DLC is an acquired taste for some people, I think having like a definitive edition of Tales of Arise where you both have it and a DLC bound together day one for Nintendo Switch 2 would go a long way, and even increase its sales even further, like going past 3 million, which I think is absolutely, well, still amazing for the series. So definitely, Tales of Arise, if it does come on Nintendo Switch 2, you know that just like I got the PS5 version, Xbox version, and PC version, I would gladly buy it a 4th time in a row. So please, Bandai Namco, Tales series, port Arise on the Switch 2 so everyone can play it, especially those who got the Nintendo Switch 1 and never played it before, or just because it never came on a Nintendo Switch. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's get on to my number 1 most wanted pick. And coming at my number 1, it is another, my last final rule breaker, as it's multiple games, and to be honest, if you could tell, I think you saw this at least coming a mile away, and that would have to be none other than the entire Kingdom Hearts series. Now, Kingdom Hearts is an amazing JRPG series, mixed in with both the elements of Disney and Final Fantasy, while still having just amazing real-time action combat, especially for a JRPG, as well as having a beautiful soundtrack from Yoko Shimomura, and an overall enjoyable story, regardless of what many people say is very convoluted. Now, obviously, the series itself deserves to be on Nintendo Switch 2, given the fact that majority of the series came to the Switch via the cloud version.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the f***?
Which still to this day is very baffling, even by Square Enix, especially when most of those games were from the PS2 era, which is again baffling. And even Kingdom Hearts 3 could be decently running on a Nintendo Switch with some compromises, but given the fact that Square took the lazy route with the only native KH game to be on the Switch, with that being Melody of Memory, which many people know is just nothing more but a rhythm game with a little bit of story in the mix, it's just really baffling that Square Enix dropped the ball of not porting this game porting the entire series onto the Nintendo Switch natively. So given the fact that Nintendo Switch 2 is around, I think Square Enix should really lock in and port all of those games natively on the Nintendo Switch 2, as I do think even the upcoming Kingdom Hearts 4, given the fact that Square Enix once again is focusing more on multi-platform, I do think that that game is also coming some way to the Nintendo Switch 2, regardless if it might have some compromises compared to the eventual versions of PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC. So please Square, fix what you've done and port these damn games to Nintendo Switch 2 natively. You have no excuse this time. And that would have to be my list. Those are my most wanted JRPGs that I want to be on the Nintendo Switch 2. What are some of your games that you want to see on the Nintendo Switch 2 that never came to Nintendo Switch 1 to begin with? I would love to know. So until then, Mad Kaiser, out.